Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is October 5th, 2015, and this is our meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Sure. Before I proceed, Commissioner Chan will not be present, as will Commissioner Camargo. So Commissioner Lal, Avanesian, here. President Hale.
Here. With that, I think we can go on to our consent items. Members, are there any amendments to the minutes from last week's meeting? Seeing none, those will be approved without objection. Next item.
3 is GWP Commission staff comments.
I think we're going to have one comment from staff on Utility Day. Commissioners, do you have any comments that you'd like to offer for the meeting? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of Commission, hello, my name is Atine Hartunian. I'm the Public Benefits Coordinator for Glendale Water and Power. I wanted to invite you and the public to our annual Utility Day, which will take place on Thursday, October 22nd from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at our Utility Operations Center. The flyers have been distributed. They're posted on our website. You also have a copy in front of you. This is an annual open house of our Utility Operations Center, open to the public, similar to an open house, and it happens once a year. And we invite everyone to attend to visit a variety of electric and water booths, stations, and demonstrations, have a free lunch while supplies last, and tour the operations center with 2 guided tours, one at 12:30 and the other at 1:30 p.m. For more information, our residents can visit glendalewaterandpower.com, and we'll also be putting information in local newspapers, on social media, so all residents could be informed about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd like to note also that we've been joined by Commissioner Camargo, who just arrived.
My apologies for being tardy.
Not at all. Madam Clerk, I think at the request of Mr. Zern, we're going to take 4B out of order and go directly to that item next.
So for a drought rate update, Stephen Zern.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, as you are aware, we have a 5-phase drought ordinance that has been on the books for some time. Phases 2 through 5 are mandatory phases. And in our last water rate restructuring, we included a drought rate that is tied directly to each of those mandatory phases. The first mandatory phase went into effect last August 2014. That was phase 2. And we put in phase 3 this past May. And with the going to phase 3, staff recommended to council that we hold off on implementing phase 3 of the drought rate until we could see what the results would be over a 6-month period of time. Council asked us to come back within 6 months, which is this month, to give them a report on where our revenues are in relation to our conservation efforts. Where we are is our conservation has been very good, as we have stated to you and to the community and the council previously. From the implementation of phase 3, which was again May of this year, we're about 26% over the same period, May through August, about 26% reduction over that same period in 2014. As you know, our mandated conservation effort through the state is 20%, so we are doing well above what we intended to do. The downside of that is water sales are down, and so therefore our revenue projections are not quite being met. That was the intent of the drought rate. The drought rate was meant to levelize our revenue. It wasn't meant to be a disincentive, wasn't meant to be a penalty. It was simply meant to levelize our revenue so that we could attend to our fixed cost needs. Fixed cost needs are in place at all times. They don't go away just because we're using less water. So we wanted to levelize our revenue stream in order to be able to maintain our fixed costs. In the 6-month period since we put phase 3 into place, our revenues have been down with that 26%. And the phase 2 rate is tied to approximate 20% reduction. And we were pretty close in our rate structure and setting that up. So you can imagine if we're running closer to 26, 27%, we're losing revenue because of a decrease in sales. So when we go back to the City Council, we'll be giving them a report. It'll be a straightforward report with 2 options. They can choose to implement the Phase 3 drought rate. They can choose to delay that implementation for some date specific, time certain, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever that may be. Essentially, what we're looking at now, we're still waiting for the final books to close. We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a $450,000 revenue decrease over what we projected in our pro forma and our COSAs, our cost of service analysis. So with that, those are the numbers we'll be providing to council. I think you all are aware of the fact that our rate structure was very thin on reserves. We decided, council decided to go with a smaller reserve contingency in order to try to keep rates as reasonable as possible. And so that, therefore, we don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to our revenue generation. But again, $450,000 to $500,000 is, I don't want to say it's nothing to sniff at. It is, but again, that will continue as we go through, especially we get into the winter season when we use less water. So that'll automatically be a drop in our sales in that regard as well. So we'll have to take all of those things into consideration when we go back and have the council debate on this and decide what they want to do going forward. That's essentially where we're at. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. For your information, just so everybody knows, the Phase 2 drought rate is 75 cents per 100 cubic feet, straight across the board. It's not tiered. It's just straight per 100 cubic feet. The Phase 3 charge would be $1.30 per 100 cubic feet.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, question is does the staff have a recommendation to council?
At this point in time, looking at our projections and going through the winter season, we have not decided yet if there's going to be a recommendation. We're simply going to put the facts out there. We are going to give what the impacts will be if that amount of revenue is lost. What it likely will impact is our CIP projects for the future, because as you know, our rate structure was built to have a pay-as-you-go component in the last 2 years, so it could affect that. We anticipate that sales are likely not to come back to the level they were. It just seems to be the nature of drought and drought reactions to those droughts, and that people do develop habits, and those habits become permanent. And I think you're all aware, this particular drought, there was a lot of activity in regards to re-landscaping. The turf removal program through MWD was wildly successful, and there are a lot of people who have gone to alternatives for their landscaping. That's permanent. That won't come back. The likelihood that somebody's going to tear out their drought-tolerant landscaping and put grass back in is probably not going to happen. And even as a city, we are looking at ways to eliminate turf, and in whether those are medians, the top of reservoirs, the landscaping in front of fire stations and pump stations and various city facilities, we're looking at ways that we can re-landscape those as well. So you can see that our usage is not going to come back to the levels it was before. So we have to factor all of those things in when we present this to the council.
And one additional question for you, Mr. Zern. So, can you speak to precedents from other local municipalities, that is the Pasadenas, Burbanks of the world? What have they done with respect to their drought rates?
Mr. Camargo, to the best of our knowledge, no agency in our area, no public agency in our area has a drought rate component as we do. There are some investor-owned utilities that have put in certain penalties. They're more aligned to if you use this much water, you're going to pay 50 cents extra per 100 cubic feet. If you go this, you're going to pay $1 extra per 100 cubic feet, all the way up to, it's very restrictive, all the way up to they'll put a restrictor on your line if you're a habitual violator. what happens in these situations, and what we tried to avoid by putting the drought rate in place, was that when it's all said and done, and you don't meet the revenue projections that you had put into your pro formas, you'll come back and raise the rates. So those who have lost significant amounts of revenue will likely come back with rate increases to try to recapture that over some period of time. And I think, again, you're all aware, we didn't really have the flexibility to do that. We were in very dire financial straits. So we didn't have cushions of reserves that we could rely on. And again, we also looked at it from the perspective of, well, if we were to do that, then you put into place a new rate structure that recaptures the revenue that you lost, but that's going to be going forward likely in perpetuity. Here we had a drought rate that addressed just that period of time when there was mandatory conservation. As soon as that's lifted by the council, that rate goes away. So it isn't something in perpetuity. Same thing as I think I explained when we contemplated changing the fixed cost versus variable cost ratio from a 70-30 to a 60-40. The impact on the ratepayer was tremendous, and that would have been going forward. So this way we thought we would best be able to levelize our revenues during these mandatory conservation periods, and at the same time be able to at least give our ratepayers their objective is that their rates are going to be the same. We didn't expect them to be higher, maybe slightly lower, but the same. And I know that flies in the face. It sounds counterintuitive when you think I'm using less water. But again, the idea was to levelize our revenues. But then again, once the dire situation, the drought situation is ended, we can take that extra charge off. So that's generally how other water agencies, and we've already heard, there's already agencies in the Inland Empire who have indicated they will be coming back with multi-year rate increases that are likely higher due to the fact that they've lost revenue from the drought.
This water that we use less, can we somehow be rewarded? Is there a fund that say we have done better, so kind of they compensate for that because everybody likes water conservation?
Mr. Avanesian, the state has not offered us any incentive other than a mandate to decrease. Obviously, if we're using less water, we're buying less water. So at the end of the day, we're spending less because we're not going out and having to buy that water from MWD. But again, that's just a commodity charge versus the fixed charges that we have to keep up. But I wish somebody would offer us an incentive, especially for those cities like us that are exceeding what even the state mandated conservation number that we were given. I'm sure you've read about cities that have not and continue to exceed what it is that they were mandated to meet. So there is fines if you exceed, but no incentive if you meet your goal or even exceed it.
Commissioner Lowe?
Well, I just wanted to make sure I understand. The drought charge is just for the phase of the drought that we are currently in. It is linked to which phase
Each phase from 2 to 5 has a specific drought charge attached to it. Right now, we are still in phase 2 with regards to the drought charge, although we are in phase 3 of the mandatory conservation. And that was the council's decision to.
Okay.
And so what we would be looking at is do we bring the current phase 3 conservation or current phase 3 drought charge up to where we are now with phase 3 in the mandatory conservation.
So the city council's choice then would be between maintaining the status quo and moving to the phase 3 charge, which is based on actual usage.
Correct.
Okay.
So the $450,000 shortfall that you identified, is that to date or is that for the remainder of the fiscal year? That's what
that has to do with from phase 3. It's not the entire fiscal year. As you know, there was a 6-month moratorium on the initial drought charge as well in the previous fiscal year. So we took somewhat of a loss that year as well and absorbed that. So that 450 is just a rough estimate, very rough estimate based on this fiscal year, since this is when we put phase 3 into into effect.
Okay, so is that deficit then likely to grow
Yes.
until the fiscal year ends on
Yes.
July 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're looking at potentially $1 million shortfall,
It could get that high, yes.
possibly, over the course of
Yes.
the year?
Now, again, you're looking at overall usage. So now that we enter the lighter months, I would assume we've lost the bulk of our money in the hot months, where you have the highest water usage. Now, as we enter the lower use months, that loss, although I think you'll still see it, especially if we maintain a 26, 27, 28% reduction, won't be as dire overall because that's a low usage month. So I don't know a straight line projection, Mr. Hale, I guess is what I'm saying.
So hope for cooler weather in the spring then.
Yes,
So,
a lot of rain.
and a lot of rain. So this raises a number of concerns, obviously, because if our consumption is permanently reduced as a result of all the drought measures that we've taken, then our COSA might actually become faulty by changed circumstances, right?
Correct.
Which means that we're going to have to come back for a corrective rate action to deal with an overall shortfall in revenues once we don't have a drought surcharge anymore.
That could be very likely.
Okay. So the concern that I have is that if we fall behind on CIEP projects, particularly those that are going to have cost reduction benefits, if we defer them, or if we don't defer them, rather, we might actually see a long run less impact on the rates, or lesser impact on the rates or our revenues if we actually implement some of those CIEP projects now. So I would like to see at our next meeting and in the context of our drought update, which CIEP projects are likely to be impacted by the revenue shortfall if we don't start collecting greater revenue over the course of this fiscal year.
Well, right now, because we're still expending bond money for our capital projects, the initial plan that we have is still on track.
Okay.
And as I would expect the following year, even at the pay-as-you-go format, it's likely would be in that last year that we might have some impact, and we can certainly take a look at that far ahead and see where we anticipate. The likelihood is that it's going to still be the distribution system, so we may fall behind, although I'd like to think that in the remainder of this year and next, we will have done a significant amount of upgrades and replacements, so we should find ourselves in a pretty good situation. But I agree with you. We never want to detract from in any way our capital improvement program. We don't want to see ourselves get into a situation of deferred maintenance, and even skipping a year can sometimes be very detrimental. So I agree with you and provide that information.
Okay. Anything else on the drought rate update? Okay. Let's go back to 4A, please.
For electrical storage, Ramona Boeg.
Good afternoon, President Hale, members of the Commission. This is an update on where we are with the energy storage. And just to give you where we are and what we said we would do, I'll give you some background. If you're familiar with the California Assembly Bill 2514, which was passed in 2010, that required that municipal utilities such as Glendale, that we need to adopt targets by October 2014, which we did. And what we had done is we adopted a target that would give us some goals on how much storage we need to acquire. And some of the premises, it has to be cost effective. It has the intention to reduce emissions for greenhouse gases, reduce demand for peak electrical generation, and defer any investment we may have on generation, transmission, or distribution, while not giving up any reliability or sacrificing reliability. So what we did at the time is we recommended to City Council that we invest into the ice bears. So we had set a target of 1.5 megawatts. And the ice bears, as you know, is we deferred the use of electricity during the peak demand periods by the ice bears producing ice at night when the cost of energy is less, and using the ice for cooling during the day. With that program or project, we replace about 400 pieces of HVAC that's aging, that's inefficient. And those are installed mainly in city facilities and customer sites and big customers mainly. So we're reaping some benefits on that. But let me talk in general as to why we're looking at storage at this time. Storage has a lot of benefits, as you know. One of the driving factors for having storage is because of the advent or the penetration, if you will, of solar power, as well as wind power. It's becoming more and more prevalent. And what's happening now is the sources are very intermittent, and we have to be able to, again, stability and reliability is one of the objectives that we have. When these resources go out, we need something to what we call load follow, be able to do that. But the batteries can do that. But if we have better generators, which we would hopefully, once we repower Grayson, we would have better units to do load follow. We won't be as dependent on batteries. It provides the frequency and voltage control, and it gives us, very importantly, what we call a black start capability with our generation. That means we always have something on standby. So when we get separated from the outside world, from LA, we'd be able to kickstart our generators without having to wait for LA to come back online. Okay, so there's some huge benefits. And then the other challenge that we have, the reason why batteries is, I'm sure you saw this before, where we talked about this for a while, is the duck curve. There's the prevalence of the energy storage is basically, what you see on the top line is, oops, I don't know if this would show up. I lost it. So what you see at the back of what I call the duct is how we used to be. That's how much generation or how much load there is in the old days. And as you see, as it's starting to curve down, as the graph is going down, is the amount of generation we're producing because it's being reduced by the amount of solar in this case and wind. But what it doesn't clearly show is the generators are still running in the background because we need to be able to support when the cloud comes over and covers the solar, they're not available, but we still have to keep the lights on. So the generators have to have a good ramp, what we call ramp rate. They need to be able to pick it up so that you won't even see the light blink. Okay, so the duct curve that you see there, the load is normally the back of the duct, but what's happening is there's a major reduction because it's being offset by renewables. But at the same time, we have to have generators still running to be able to do that. By having a huge storage, we don't need to worry about the ramp rate of the generator, so that's one of the benefits. So this is one of the driving factors in the big picture. So there are a lot of technologies that we're looking at. There's the battery storage. It's called, there's different types now depending on the response. We can always install capacitor units. We have a lot of capacitors now in the system that we use for frequency control. There's some flywheel technology, that's old technology. Or if we have any hydro opportunities, we'll be able to invest in the hydro. And there's a new one that's new. It's a compressed air energy storage. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the three main factors, actually there's a fourth factor that I didn't list here. So the batteries, if we're talking about the batteries, there's an issue about how quickly we can charge it and discharge time. A lot of batteries, we can only use it for about half an hour before it's completely discharged. Then it takes about 4 to 6 hours to get it charged, to get it to a point where we can use it. So it's always on standby. Capacity, yeah, we need a real big one. So we're not talking about the Energizer Bunny in this case. We're talking about huge batteries. A 600 kilowatt unit is the size of a big trailer truck. And 600 kilowatts is really peanuts based on the industry that we're in. And then the cost. So, and the other factor is here we're pretty much landlocked there's not too much space where we can put battery storage. So those are the things that we're factoring in. And as you recall, back in June, we completed our IRP, or the Integrated Resource Plan. We looked at how we can incorporate storage into our portfolio. At that time, and even to this day, it's not cost effective to use battery for storage. To give you an idea, the cost of battery per kWh, currently it's about $475 to $500 per kWh, per megawatt hours, as opposed to what we're paying for. If you recall the Skylar project that we have, that's only $78 that we're paying for. So there's a huge difference in trying to provide the stability and reliability with respect to cost, and we have not reflected that on our rates. So there's going to be a huge impact on rates if we start implementing or including batteries into our portfolio currently. But the good news is that because of the penetration of the batteries too, we expect that there's going to be a dramatic decrease in the prices of batteries in the next 5 to 10 years, but it still doesn't resolve the space requirement. The balance of plant they're incorporating to the design, it's still not a simple matter of just flopping it in. We still need the balance of plant, have the breakers, have switch gears, so that it would come in hand when we need it. So, what are we looking at currently? We have been talking to battery suppliers. One of the plans that we have on the proposed repowering Grayson Power Plant is we're going to try and incorporate a 20 megawatt unit, which is when we anticipate in the next 5 years, if there's a cost reduction. Even if we don't purchase that at this time, we will make provisions so that we can install, we will have space and electrical provisions to put in a battery storage. We are currently, we have made provisions in one of our substation projects, if we can come up with, negotiate a good deal, to test a smaller battery, about 500 kilowatts, or about as much as 1 megawatt, to put into one of our projects if we could negotiate a good deal on the price. We're also talking to some of the, we have some solar developers that are coming that are offering a lot higher than 1 megawatt capacity. One of the considerations is in talking to them is in order to negotiate an efficient or effective PPA or power purchase agreement, is if they can provide some storage to help us levelize the impact of the. So that's currently being negotiated. I can't tell you who we're negotiating with because it's still confidential. But that's something that we proposed as late as last week to one of the suppliers. And additionally, Burbank has just gotten a grant from Department of Energy looking at compressed air energy storage. They're looking at that as a possibility to be included as part of the IPP repowering. So they found a salt cave near where we have the IPP. And so they're trying to develop that where they use excess energy at night through a compressor, and then they collect the compressed air in this cave, and then when they need it, it can come online and basically mix that with gas and generate power. So it's like water storage, except now it's compressed air storage. That's fairly new. So that's something we're keeping an eye on. If the project comes out fruitful, we might partner with them and participate in this project. So the takeaway here is that this is a viable technology, but currently the cost is prohibitive for us to consider at this time. So with that, any questions or comments?
Any questions?
This 1 megawatt units that you referred, it is good for how many hours?
Currently, all the batteries we've looked at, they're only good for 30 minutes to an hour. There's a new technology that's called the sodium sulfur. They're claiming that they can operate up to 4 hours, but that's even more expensive than the half-hour battery units that we're looking at.
Is that sufficient for, kind of emergency peaking resource?
Yeah, there are two reasons for us to look at the battery. One's the peaking, the other one's also to mitigate our inadvertent, our interconnection with LADWP. We have responsibility to keep the difference between what we scheduled and our load is to, in this case, up to 8 megawatt window. So there's some incentives for us to keep it within 8 megawatts, and the batteries will help us get there. But on the plus side, once we start repowering the power plant and we have a better responsive unit than what we have now, that won't be as big of an issue as it is now.
What's the state of the art as far as distributed storage through electric vehicles?
The state of the art, I mean, you heard about the power box, I think, from Elon, that's one of the considerations at that level. But then there's also some arguments being made that it defeats the purpose of the payback for the residents. So rather than using our distribution system as storage, they're now storing it so that they can use it for their own consumption, so they won't get the rebate that they're looking for. So there's a different philosophy happening on that now. And I believe it's still too costly to do that, and it takes up a lot of space.
Excuse me. When you're talking about provision for battery, even if we are not really buying and putting there, you mean buying the land, or what is that?
Well, right now we don't have any land to put it in, and we have to put it as close as possible to wherever we have a substation, so we don't have to build any or invest in any transmission or distribution lines. So that's what I'm talking about, is we need to find a space where either within or right next to a substation or part of the repowering, so it's within our power plant.
I think that about covers it.
Okay.
Why don't we
Thank
move
you.
on to item 4C?
4C is Conservation Drought Update, Atine Harutunian.
Mr. President, members of Commission, hello, my name is Atine Hartunian. I'm the Public Benefits Coordinator for Glendale Water and Power. I wanted to point your attention to our water conservation gauges that you see up on the screen. These are our water gauges, and we use them in our marketing and our website and our newsletters to show our residents how well we are doing and how far we've come since we started conservation. For the month of August, we did pass our goal. As you could see, we had a savings of 24.1%. We had similar results in June and July, if you recall. The gauge on the left is the cumulative water savings gauge over 12 months. And the way that we're trending, we seem to be getting closer to our 20% goal. So we are going to track this until February, as the governor's mandate states. And so we definitely want to thank our residents for all their efforts. As you could see, everyone is definitely making an impact on our conservation efforts. So it's a great way to show them how well they're doing. In addition to all of the outreach that we are doing from time to time, we'd like to remind residents that we still need to be conserving and the days of our schedule, our watering schedule. So our next slide just shows an example of our newest type of outreach, which is our new bill envelopes that will start this week and will go through December. Just a friendly reminder to our customers, we're still in a drought. We need to be conserving. Their efforts do really add up, and just a few tips to show them what they could still be doing. And we'll continue these, as mentioned, until December. That is all I have today for the update. If you have any questions, please let me know.
So for the state mandate purposes, the one that matters is the year out, year by year, or the comparison between 2013 for the entire year. Right?
Yes, and then actually we do send both information over to them, the monthly percentage as well as the cumulative. Yes.
So assuming that we keep up our monthly water saving, the 24%, do we make it to the 20% target by the end of the year?
By February 2016. That's the way we're trending right now. Obviously, we're expecting an El Nino season to start, so the way it's going, we see that we're trending towards 20, yes.
Good. Any other questions?
Should we turn off our sprinklers tonight since we've had rain?
Yes, actually,
tomorrow?
we do have that in our ordinance to stop, to turn off and not water 2 days after a rainstorm. But we've had some rain today, so we do encourage residents to basically turn off their sprinklers 2 days before rain and 2 days after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none,
Thank you.
I think we're done. Next item.
5 is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of the agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report.
I don't have any cards. Madam Clerk, do we have any cards?
No.
Okay.
So
Next item.
6 is agenda forecast.
So, members, the only amendment that I would make to our agenda forecast at the moment is to add on the water conservation drought update, another update on the drought rate and potential council actions that were taken, and just review of what gets impacted if we end up with a shortfall by, bless you, if we end up with a shortfall by the end of the fiscal year.
Agree.
Okay. Any other additions or changes to our agenda forecast?
So for discussion among my fellow commissioners, recall that at last meeting we talked about the implementation of the turf program, and I think there was a discussion around trying to understand what that was going to look and feel like. Would there be? I think Sarojini, you touched on. Would the turf be recyclable? Any issues like that? So I'm not seeing that. Is that something we want to consider for an upcoming meeting?
And this is for the artificial turf requirement that the state imposed,
Right.
correct?
The state imposed new law that
Prohibition on
prohibits
city regulation of artificial turf. I'd like to hear that as well. It's probably in the context of our legislative update.
Do you want that for next month? Is that?
Yeah, I think for November.
Well, I was just looking at the notes from our last meeting, and it looks like that right now it's with the Community Development Department, so the general manager was going to ask that someone from Community Development come and make a presentation about the recommendations that they're going to be making so that we could be informed about it.
So I'd suggest we actually add that to our forecast for November, and if CDD isn't available for whatever reason, we can always kick it to the next month, if that's agreeable.
I concur.
Okay.
Concur. Another thought would be, for Mr. Abweg, when do you think would be the right time for us to revisit the progress against the renewable portfolio standards?
We can give you an update next month, if you like. We just submitted to the CEC where we are with our PS. That was due October 1st, so we can give you an update next month. I think we did one 2 months ago. We can do it quarterly if that pleases the commissioners.
I think quarterly is good.
Agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll bring that up next month. That's good, ready to go.
Great. Any other changes? Good. I think that pretty much covers it. Next item, please.
Okay, 7 is adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Could I possibly make a quick comment before we adjourn? I'm sorry, I should have brought this up during comments, but I just wanted to mention that on September 27th, GWP hosted a wonderful event here at Perkins Plaza, which was to welcome the public into the art event, Art from the Ashes. I brought my whole family, and it was really a wonderful event. I really wanted to commend the staff on that, and also to commend the Arts Commission and the City of Glendale for funding it. I thought it was a really imaginative way to draw people into thinking about the drought, because the drought isn't just a physical experience that we're having out in the world, it's also an emotional and intellectual experience. And I love the fact that they had invited local vendors to come in and talk about things like drought-tolerant plantings and native plants. So just very well done. It was a great family event, and I thought it spoke really well about the utility. So that's all.
Excellent. All right, I believe we have a motion to adjourn on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
So without objection, we are adjourned.